Hey everyone, this is Austin.
This is going to be like 40 years later. We'll have one
first
episode.
Oh, shoot. In time for what should be retirement, but none of us may be able to retire with how the Dow Jones is tanking.
Dude. We're not retiring.
No way.
We're working forever.
For real.
It's like Social Security.
I can't do my job forever. It's too physically demanding.
That's why I'm trying to move out of.
My back is already shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Hey guys, this is Austin.
And this is Matt.
And this is Clearly Overthinking. A little bit nerdy.
And a lot of bit wordy. This is going to be really easy.
This all makes sense in my head, and I think it makes sense coming out, but it might just be like a jumbled mess.
Let's get it.
All right, so we'll just jump right in. We kind of want to talk a little bit more about your overthinkers, and so we've just got a list of questions for each of us to answer. And the first one is, what do you do for work?
Yeah, what do I do for work? I am a software developer. Technically, my title is software engineer, but I work on a mobile application, so I'm a mobile developer. But that's what I do.
Gotcha. How long have you been doing that?
Oh, it's been 6 years.
In your current role?
Well, like on my
own. Or was that just like the grind? It's just been like some of that was a grind to like work your way up, or?
No, I mean, a little bit of both, but really it's not my current role. I've had 3 different roles on my team, but I've been on my team or on the product that I'm on for 6 years. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did you kind of get into that? Because I know that your background wasn't in software design or software engineering.
Yeah. So the short version of the story is my wife and I found out we were going to have a kid, and I was working part-time at Best Buy, and there was no prospects of growth there. I mean, minimum wage at the time I think was like $7.50.
Oh yeah.
So part-time on $750 an hour, $7.50 an hour. Wow, $7.50 would be sick, dude.
What'd you leave Best Buy for?
Yeah. Yeah, that was gonna cut it. So I had to have some sort of career, and I was thinking through what I wanted to do. I had always played video games as a kid and loved computers, and so I thought that might be a potential avenue. And my dad worked for a cloud computing company and was managing a bunch of people, and he was like, we pay these guys great. They've got job security for forever.
Yeah.
So I thought I would want to be one of those guys, a network engineer, and started working my way there. And fast forward a few years, and I made it to network engineering at the company I'm at right now, and I hated it. And so
what did you hate about it?
Well, network engineering is kind of like software engineering in the sense that like it has a broad application. So it means something in particular, but there's a lot of ways that works itself out. It's usually like engineering, which I generally would describe as problem solving, and networking. So like solving problems in networking via networking. So very much in that realm. For me, my role in the team was an administrative one. I think it was over 600 remote sites, and I had to kind of monitor them and set them up and tear them down. Anytime the company would need a new site, we would have to stand up a network so that they could access the internal network of the company with some sort of reliability to do business with the customers, which is essentially what was happening. I mean, it was like, so I work for a transportation company, and in order for, like, as part of these contracts we're securing with people like Target or Walmart or whatever, we transport a lot of their goods, and so they want an office like in their warehouse, in their distribution center. And so they're not going to let it just piggyback on their network most of the time. And even when they do, it's not always reliable. And so kind of my job was help set up those sites, and then when they leave, tear them down. And you have to walk through a lot of kind of simple things, but for business people, it's very foreign, and they're like, this is not my job, it's your job. And so there's just a lot of stress that comes with that. And I thought I was going to be doing more of the abstract kind of problem solving of like network design, and that's not for introductory network engineers though. That's for like the the big dogs. So,
Yeah.
so I wasn't really stoked on that. And we hired an app developer. He had been doing software engineering for, I don't know, 20 something years. He's an older guy. And he was making some sort of graphic presentation. So like he was taking some data about network outages and uptime and all this stuff. And he was presenting it to the management team, and they were just stoked out of their minds. They're like, this is incredible and so useful. That my director came over to this guy and was like, we should be paying you more. And it was like, you know what I mean? It was like, they might as well just like gave him a bag of money. He just seemed like he was a magician.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I was like, man, how do you learn this stuff? And like, bro, he just told me, he's like, this is arts and crafts. This is the easiest like software engineering you'll ever do in your life. Like you could do this, you could learn this. And so I decided to figure it out. But that was kind of where I started looking into software engineering. My sister-in-law at the time was a recruiter for software engineering. And so I was aware of kind of the lifestyle, the attitudes of people that she worked with. And she's like, yeah, you would fit in great. And so I had a lot of things motivating me to get into software engineering, and finally got a shot at my company right now. And I work on one of their mobile apps. And so I've been doing that for 6 years.
Okay. And in conversations we have had, not on the podcast, obviously, because this is episode 1, you've talked about the difference between like front end and back end designers. Can you talk about like what's your role in terms of developing the app and kind of what that means? Yeah.
I'm a front end guy. You know, I do more of the arts and crafts stuff. So in general, in software engineering, they'll break it down in to categories of what your specialty is. And there are some people who are good at everything, or I should say they're sufficient at everything, because it's really hard in in software engineering to be really good at a variety of things. But there are people who are really sufficient or proficient in both the back end services and the front end of the app, and we call those people full stack. It's not me, but I'm a front end guy. I have dabbled a little bit with the back end services, but the distinctions kind of might not make sense to most people. But one way to think about it is anytime you're using an application as the user, let's say TikTok on your phone, you're scrolling through all these videos, you're interacting in every single like graphic element, everything from it picking up the gesture of your finger to swipe between videos to clicking buttons and then seeing a response of like a heart, you know, or saving it to your favorites, whatever. All of that is the front end of the app. It's manipulating data that it's receiving, and it's giving you feedback. It's kind of like you're interacting with this data, but it's giving you feedback. And that's what the front end is designed to do. Okay. Kind of put a face to the data, but also be responsive to you, so you know how you're interacting with it.
Gotcha.
Kind of. And so that's the front end app, or front end development entails. Back end development is more of the logic behind all that stuff. So what happens when you interact with certain things on the app. And
so this is more like the algorithm, the back end stuff?
Yeah. 100%.
So like if I like a video on TikTok, then the algorithm is the back end stuff that like makes sure that more of that sort of content comes across my feed.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And I guess another way to think about it is like the front end is when it's done well, the attempt is to make it mostly presentational. So we're not really doing advanced logic. We want to take all of the data that we need and the logic it takes to kind of like massage the data and present it in the way that the app can understand. We want that all to be done outside of the app, because that makes it more efficient, and it also makes it easier to develop. So on the front end part of it. So yeah, that's kind of one way to think about it. Front end is like presentational, and back end is more of your logic.
Gotcha.
It's the algorithm. It's the services that when you go into the app and you're trying to sign in, right? That's talking directly to probably multiple services, but it's like pulling data from your account. You know, it's all that stuff, authenticating and stuff.
So do you work on one app or multiple apps?
No, I only work on one app. So the app I work on it's an app that the drivers at the transportation company I work at are required to use. Okay. So it's a little unique. It's unique in that drivers are forced to use it. Okay. I mean, like it's not like a, hey, would you want to use this app? It's like, you've got to use this app to do your job. Gotcha. And so that's very different for most apps. this is kind of characteristic of apps which you'd consider internal. So like we don't expose this app for other people to use. But a characteristic of an internal app is like it's designed for people within the company, and therefore they're forced to use it most of the time.
Okay.
And also therefore like what they want, how much fun they're having using these features. It's important, but it really isn't the main thing. Whereas an app that's sold on the App Store or something, like you want to be very responsive to feedback, because that's going to directly influence like usage and sales and stuff. So
this is probably a dumb question. But like once the app has been developed, like what keeps you, what makes you, like what makes your job necessary? Like the app is there, right?
Yeah.
So like what do you do that makes it necessary for you to continue working?
Man, you deliberately put in bugs so when everything fails. I'm just kidding, dude. That's a meme if you don't already know, people who are listening to this. But
I've always been curious about that, right? Because I mean, obviously someone's doing the work of like software updates and things like that, but it sounds like that may be more like, is that more back end stuff, the software update realm, or is that kind of a mix of both, or what? Yeah. So generally kind of like, now that the app is out there and being used, like what do you do to essentially continue to be in your job? And then go ahead and just say
yeah, dude. I mean, it's a really good question, and it's actually like a really loaded question, because when you ask like, okay, well, you've developed an app and now what? Well, it's hard to ever look at an application after you develop it and everything is golden. You know what I mean? Like the idea that you would go through a development process and you'd produce an app and it would be, on the App Store, it's selling, everyone's using it, and everything about it is 100% golden, not only in the way it was created, but also in like the way it's achieving the things it's created. So everyone who designed it like had the perfect use cases in mind and accounted for every variable, and like,
oh, okay,
like that's just not really how the development process works.
Gotcha.
So because we're flawed people and we just don't have perfect knowledge and stuff, we end up making apps that inevitably are imperfect in one way or the other. And so a lot of times what happens is we'll create an app, and the process is actually really convoluted because it has to do with a lot of like funding and business elements where you have kind of targets you're looking for, or features you want. In terms of an internal app, this is particular to us, where because the user base are employees, and like I said, we're not really developing for user experience, although that's important. Usually the business has a few objectives in mind, like, hey, we need them to be able to do this, and this action needs to be very reliable with limited failure because it directly influences pay. Like, so maybe you release the app and you're monitoring the usage and you're like, man, we're getting like 5% failures on this or something. Like there's just never a state where the app is functioning perfectly. And I would also say that there's never a state where after the app is made, there isn't some sort of feature that somebody wants. And so your job is kind of like bugs, maintenance, and then everybody always wants more functionality.
Right.
And I guess lastly, there's just the nature of technology. As soon as you build something, like in literal months, the technology you build it with will have an update. Yeah. And so your app will need to be updated in some form or fashion. And we generally just call that tech debt. And so you kind of have tech debt baked into every product. So every product needs more than just an initial build. It needs maintenance and support. It needs new feature development. Yeah. If it's a healthy product, if it's a healthy app, then people are generating more ideas of like, hey, here's how users can do this and that. But at the very least, every app, even an unhealthy one, is going to need some sort of maintenance and support.
Yeah. So this is the last question I have in regards to your work, but like, what do you see as your long-term goal in terms of software development and software engineering? Or do you have a long-term goal? Yeah.
I mean, I think I used to be like, I want to be like an expert, and, I want to be a master at these languages that we use to build stuff. I've backed off on that a lot just because the family life kind of is what I enjoy the things that it's enabled me to have outside of work.
Yeah.
Like software engineering is a great job because of the lifestyle it's, enabled me to afford. But just like technologies in an app become outdated, so does your knowledge of those things. And so you constantly have to be learning new things and growing in your understanding. And that can be really fun, but it can also be like exhausting,
For sure.
where
Yeah.
you're in the same way that an application would have baked in technical debt. You as a developer have like baked in imposter syndrome, because the second you think you know something, it's already changed.
Sure.
And that's kind of common for a lot of the tools we use. It's not just the app itself, it's everything. And so I've thought like long term, I wanted to be some sort of expert, but more recently I'm thinking I probably would pursue some sort of management role
Sure.
in a technical space, because I think that's more along the lines of what I value. Like, I enjoy coding, but there are some people I work with, like they live and breathe it. They're like geniuses, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think my focus is more people oriented.
Sure.
So
Sure.
not that those two things are diametrically opposed, but it's just like long term, like I'm gonna be working for another 36 years, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Or more.
yeah, basically till I'm dust. So can I do development that long? I don't think I can, dude. So
Sure.
we'll see. But that's kind of where my head's at now.
Cool.
What about you, dude? What do you do for work?
Yeah, so I'm a physical therapist here in Northwest Arkansas. In particular, I treat patients in the outpatient setting with different neurologic diagnoses. And so that can be anything from elderly individuals who have difficulty with balance, or they have like dizziness or something like that, to young people with like cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy. I work with a lot of patients who have had strokes, a lot of patients who have Parkinson's disease, a lot of degenerative disease processes in the population of people that I work with. And so, I went to school here in Fayetteville. I got my doctorate here in Fayetteville, and I just love it here. I mean, I grew up just down the road from this house where we're on now, less than 10 minutes. And I don't ever want to leave. I love it here. And, there are some things that I would like to see change in terms of what healthcare in Northwest Arkansas has to provide to this population that's continually growing. And so, yeah, I'm super jazzed about it.
Is that kind of like what you would say is part of your passion, is seeing kind of physical therapy in that regard kind of grow?
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I have thought for a long time now, the thing that got me into physical therapy in the first place was one of my best friends from college was in an accident, and he had an incomplete C6 spinal cord injury. And we've got one major hospital system in Arkansas. It's down in Little Rock. It's called Baptist Health Rehab. And they do have an inpatient rehab facility that provides intensive inpatient rehab services to patients with brain injury. They have one team that's like brain injury and stroke, and they have another team that's like spinal cord injuries. But at the time, what was recommended to my buddy is to go out to Colorado to a hospital called Craig. Really, really good hospital. And Tyler came back, and we were living in Russellville. We were going to college, and it was just really frustrating to me that he got this like great inpatient rehab experience where they have like top of the line equipment, really ambitious and passionate physical therapists that like they know spinal cord injuries, right? And so like if anyone's going to give him the best shot at recovery in terms of knowing what he needs to work on and how he needs to practice those things, it's going to be these guys in this intense inpatient rehab. And then he comes back here, and we don't have, especially around Russellville, we don't have substantial outpatient neuro rehab in a lot of parts of the state. So it's frustrating that he gets this great experience, then he comes back, and the unfortunate thing about inpatient rehab is that he got to be out there for like 3 months, and I think that can be a little bit more common out at inpatient rehab facilities like Craig. They may have some like charity capabilities to keep people in rehab longer, but the nature of inpatient rehab is that most of those people aren't going to be back to their prior level of function when they leave inpatient rehab. And so there's got to be some other step between, getting out of inpatient rehab, returning home, but still trying to figure out, well, how do I function with my current capabilities right now, especially in my home or at work or things like that. And so, so that's kind of where I step in, or where, the clinic that I work steps in. We've got a few neurologic therapists, that's all we do is treat people who, you know, are coming home from inpatient rehab and they're trying to figure out like, how do I get in and out of bed? Or, you know, I have trouble walking 20 feet and I'd like to be able to like walk from my bedroom out to the living room or things like that. And so, and then of course it's not everyone that we get, it comes from inpatient rehab. That's more of like the traumatic side. So people who've had spinal cord injuries and brain injuries. But, you know, we also, you know, work with patients who have Parkinson's disease and they've had it for 15 years. Right. And so it's not like something traumatic happened that they needed to go to the hospital and then they went to rehab and then they came to us. It's just, well, they've got Parkinson's and that disease process is going to progress over time. And so we're available to help our patients implement strategies to overcome the deficits that they have, as well as try to set them up for success in what kind of exercise can they be engaging in so that we can try to slow or pause the disease process for as long as or the progression of the disease process for as long as possible. And so I really want Arkansas to be the kind of state where people don't have to leave. They don't have to go as far as Georgia or Colorado or Illinois or I'm trying to think of some other ones, or Texas, you know, down in Houston where Tier is. They don't have to go that far away to get high quality care because that can be very expensive. It can be really difficult on patients' families, especially if they're gone for like 3 months and then, you know, your children or your spouse or whatever, your parents still have to, you know, they still have to keep going on with their lives. Kids can't just be out of school for 3 months, right, in the middle of the school year. Typically, spouses can't just be off work for, barring like FMLA or something like that. But, you know, life continues to go on. And so I would like to be a part of whatever sort of organization or team can bring that sort of high quality neuro rehab to Arkansas to give Arkansans better access to that sort of care.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty dope job. It's super impactful. It sounds like.
Yeah, I love it. So I graduated in May of 22. I got licensed in August of 22. And so I've just been practicing for like 2.5 years, but I'm super passionate about it. I kind of like what you were talking about. It's one of those things where science is always changing and research is always finding out new things about like, well, what's the best approach in terms of providing the opportunity for optimal recovery. And so it is one of those things where you kind of have to stay on top. You don't want to be providing interventions or care that's outdated, especially, I mean, if you care about your patients, you want to give them the best opportunity possible. So if you're doing outdated stuff, then you're not really staying on top of like making sure you're giving the best quality care that you can. And so a lot of my attention in terms of my profession that doesn't fall within the hours of, 8 to 5 is looking at what kind of CEUs or continuing education courses I can take just to continue to stay on top of what literature and research says.
Yeah, and I think you talked about this before, but tell me a little bit about like the education process, because didn't you say like physical therapists used to just be like an undergrad?
Yeah, so it used to be a bachelor's, and this was back
That's
in like
crazy.
that kind of really started to transition out in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so it used to be just a bachelor's degree like in the 90s and before. And then for whatever reason, they decided to move it up to a master's degree program. And then as time went on, they decided to transition. It was either CAPTE, which is the body that accredits physical therapy schools to say like, yeah, you can graduate physical therapists or doctors of physical therapy. Or it was the APTA, which is like our national association that set a goal that like by something like 2018, 2020 or something like that, all programs would be like all physical therapy programs would be doctorate programs, and everyone that was graduating from PT school would be a doctor. And so I think one of the biggest pushes for that was the possibility of direct access, which just means that like normally the way things go in states that don't have direct access is you go to your doctor, you say, I've got back pain or I've been falling more recently. And the doctor says, oh, it sounds like maybe you could benefit from physical therapy. So they write a referral, and that referral in states that don't have direct access is required. You cannot go to physical therapy unless a doctor has written a referral. now in direct access states, you have back pain, you can come right to my clinic and let me check you out. Now, in a lot of cases, insurance still wants that doctor's referral. So like, just because we have or like in Arkansas, we have direct access, but that doesn't mean that your insurance is cool with you just coming into my clinic and getting checked out. A lot of times they're still going to want, just because it takes a long time to change things up. Your insurance is still going to be like, well, I don't even know that this is necessary. So you need to get a doctor to say that it's necessary.
Dang.
So before I cover it. But you could be coming to see me for back pain, and, physical therapists, our specialty is musculoskeletal conditions and neuromuscular conditions. And so if you come see me for back pain, I need to be able to identify, is your back pain something that falls within my scope of practice, right? So that's kind of where the whole doctorate thing came in, is that I can effectively screen you so that if it doesn't fall within my scope of practice, I know like, oh shoot, I got to send you back to your doc because this is not following a musculoskeletal pattern.
Do you ever have those situations where like someone comes in and you're doing a triage or something and you're like, well, you're showing signs of, some work that we could be doing physical therapy wise, but it also seems like you have like a deeper condition. Like, what do? Do you just send them off and be like, hey, take care of that first and come back? Or is
this is actually an interesting occurrence that happened. I was treating a patient who had previously been seen for a stroke, and I was working with them. They had developed some shoulder pain, and so that's what I was seeing them for, was this shoulder pain. But there was something about the way this patient moved that I had forgotten, because I was not their therapist when they had a stroke. This was like years before, but I knew they had a neurologic history, and I was seeing them for this shoulder pain, and the way they moved, I was like, it's very Parkinsonian. And so I started talking to this person about their Parkinson's disease, and it totally slipped my mind that they did not, like, they were not coming, or had not been coming previously for Parkinson's. And so I was like, yeah, you should probably go see your neurologist if you feel like this is really becoming kind of an issue. And so that was my bad to not like have been like at that time been really aware, like, oh, this person has not been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. But I got them back to the neurologist, and then shortly after that, this person was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And so, which is kind of necessary, right? So like I could work with a person who's presenting with certain deficits, regardless of whether they've got that diagnosis or not. But like Parkinson's disease in particular, it's super important that you get that medically managed, like with the right medications or something like that, because physical therapy alone can be helpful, but it's not going to totally, it's not going to be like the end all be all answer. Physical therapy in combination with proper medical care given by a neurologist is the gold standard right now. So yeah, it's definitely possible that people come in and I'm like, there's definitely something going on that we can work with, but I can't for sure say, that this is the only thing going on. So it is within my scope of practice to reach out to the doctor that referred them or their primary care doctor and just say, hey, I'm seeing some things that seem like neurologic, and they don't have anything in their chart documented as having a history of neurologic stuff. And so I think it'd probably be appropriate if we get some sort of imaging done, like an MRI of their spinal cord, of their brain, just to see what might be underlying all these issues. And so, yeah, that's not uncommon whatsoever.
Dang, that's crazy, dude.
Yeah. So, yep.
So we hit the education. Now, the $1 million question: when you're going into a room, everyone's meeting you.
I can't tell if this is serious.
Are you? It's deadly serious. Are you going into these rooms? You're like, oh yeah, my name is Austin. Dr. Miller, or just Austin Miller? Are you doing the letters at the end? What are the letters again?
So
PhD?
No, it's not a PhD. So PhD is
that's a philosophy.
Regarded for doctor of philosophy, and usually is tied to some amount of research or like faculty. You always think of faculty as having PhDs, right? But usually, especially in the physical therapy world, if you have a PhD, it's because you did a lot of research and you got published. But no, I do not ever introduce myself as Dr. Miller.
But what are your letters? Everyone has to know.
So my letters are Dr. Austin Miller, PT, DPT. I just took my neurologic clinical specialty exam yesterday. So if I pass that, I'll get to add 3 letters to the end of that, and it'll be NCS if I pass.
That's crazy.
It was a freaking hard test, so I don't know.
So like theoretically, you could just keep on getting specialties, and
yeah.
your letters could be
Actually, so technically, I do have 4 more letters after my title.
Do those-
So I've got Dr. Austin Miller, PT. The PT designates that I am a licensed physical therapist in a state, but in particular the state of Arkansas. The DPT is my degree, so it's my doctorate of physical therapy.
Okay.
And then the 4 letters I have after that right now is CSRS, which is given by a course. It's a certification in stroke rehabilitation. So certified stroke rehabilitation specialist is what those 4 letters stand for. So.
Dang. Do each of those letters come with like $1,000 raise or something, bro?
No. One thing
he said sadly.
No, one thing that's frustrating to the physical therapy world is that
not you, but the physical therapy world.
Yeah, not me. I love everything about my position and everything. Nothing ever goes wrong. No, I mean, a lot of people think that, I say a lot of people, a lot of physical therapists and lobbyists for physical therapy feel like physical therapy is not fully appreciated or valued at the service that we actually provide. And so imagine, if you will, so the U.S. spends $50 billion a year on injuries and hospitalizations related to falls.
Just falls?
Just falls.
Holy.
Right? And so if physical therapists can get people referred to them before they have these falls, then theoretically, if we can decrease their fall risk, then we can save the U.S. and you know, these insurance companies, healthcare. We can save a ton of money if we can prevent all of these, or you know, if we can have even just a little bit of opportunity to prevent these falls that then lead to secondary injuries, right? And so that should be valuable, because it's obviously much more expensive to pay for, you know, surgery that to fix a hip fracture, or surgery or recovery or whatever to fix a brain bleed, or to recover from a brain bleed.
How often is someone falling that maybe, like, let's say for instance, this number for hospitalizations for falling, how often are those same people also having to go to physical therapy anyway? Like, as a part
that's
of
a great
recovery?
question. I mean, I think that we're getting more and more of these patients in than we used to be. And I think that that's because we are starting to see a change in the perception of what physical therapy can offer to individuals and to the healthcare field as a whole. So I can't exactly, that's tough. I don't know that stat, to be honest with you, but
if you just had like a ballpark it, like what percentage would you say?
What percentage of people
that are hospitalized for a fall then have to take some sort of physical therapy as recovery? Or I guess
how many people
recommended?
I guess I misunderstood your question. I thought you were asking how many people that are hospitalized after a fall were already getting physical therapy.
No, like
you're asking how many people after a fall are going to have to get physical therapy?
Yeah, because like the idea is like, hey man, if we were just meeting you guys in advance, we could help you avoid this issue.
Sure.
And then insurance is having to pay for it anyway if it's expected that after. So to a certain extent,
you're always, I mean, anyone who has a fall that's hospitalized for that fall, they're going to get physical therapy at some point in that hospital stay. So even if you fall and like break your hip and they surgically fix it, well, while you're in that acute care stay, you are more than likely you're going to see a physical therapist, because the hospital needs to know what is the physical therapist's recommendation on where you ought to go after you leave the hospital, right? Because it behooves the hospital to make sure you get the proper care you need, because let's say that they are ignorant and they just are like, okay, well, we fixed your hip, go home, and then you fall again and hurt yourself again. There's a certain number of days after you've been rehospitalized that
just kind of like liability,
that the hospital, like if you are rehospitalized in a certain number of days after you were discharged from the hospital, if it falls within a certain number of days, then my understanding is the hospital then foots the bill for that readmission, because the hospital should have done a better job to make sure that you were on your way to proper recovery and they were making those necessary recommendations. So in order for them to make the necessary recommendations, they need a physical therapist to go see you and
But it's kind of like a sign off.
Yeah. So
it's not
like,
like
so if you were super debilitated after that fall,
Yeah.
maybe I'll be like, oh, you should probably go to inpatient rehab. You'll get 3 hours of therapy every single day. You'll probably stay there for 2 to 3 weeks. And then when you leave there, you'll probably get set up with some outpatient care unless they decide that you're like golden, you've met all those goals and you're perfectly functional, you're back to private level function.
But is it one of those things where like you make that recommendation and then like the hospital's like, do you understand these recommendations as they've been read to you?
Yeah, but so,
like, all right, we're done.
So that's a great point. Yeah, so basically like the hospital makes the recommendations and they will send the referrals, but it's still up to the patient or the patient's family to get them there.
Yeah.
Technically, if a person is of sound mind, the hospital can't force them to go to rehab. They can't force them to go to a nursing home to get. And a lot of people think like, well, if I go to a nursing home, that means like I'm just going to live in a nursing home until I die. No, it's just a less intense form of rehab than like inpatient rehab facilities. But they can't force you to do that. And if you say like, if a doctor says this is where we are recommending you go, and you say no, then the doctor will document that as patient was discharged and against medical advice decided to return home. So then it'll be documented in your chart. Like, we told you should go to rehab. You said no. So.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm sure the insurance loves that part.
Yeah. Right. Well, but yeah, I would say at some point in the recovery phase after a fall, if you've been hospitalized for that fall, you're going to interact with physical therapy, whether that's just in the acute care setting, or if you go to rehab, or if you get home health after you're discharged from the hospital, or if you go to outpatient therapy. So.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could talk to you about this for
I could go
hours,
on and on. Neurology, it's dope.
Physical therapy.
Physical therapy is dope. But the brain, the spinal cord, the human body,
How about
the
this?
neuromuscular
30
system.
seconds.
Super awesome.
30-second spiel as to why people should perhaps pursue preventative physical therapy. Are you legally allowed to say that?
Well, sure, but I mean, honestly, I will say my whole goal in physical therapy as a physical therapist is, I hope that one day I will work myself out of a job, right? Because if we are taking care of our populations well enough before you have a stroke, then you won't ever need me for stroke rehab, right? Yeah. Now that isn't as easy to put or to say the same thing about something like multiple sclerosis or ALS or Parkinson's disease, because that's not something that's triggered. Like, those deficits aren't triggered by something traumatic like a stroke or a brain injury or a traumatic brain injury or anything like that. But just know that it's going to save you a lot of money. It's going to save, probably save a lot of your quality of life. If you recognize that you're not doing as well as you used to, and it's causing dysfunction in your life, it can't hurt to at least just get evaluated. I mean, the most it's going to hurt is whatever your copay is, which sometimes that sucks. But for the sake of your quality of life, even if you can learn some strategies to keep yourself moving, and keep yourself safe, then why not do that?
It's dope.
Yeah.
We're going to have to do a whole other episode of Ask a Doctor. You'd be like Dr.
It's
Phil.
a doctor
just like,
physical therapy.
Yeah,
so
but you answer all of the doctor questions.
What's something you're good at that isn't your job?
Man, I'm really good at talking for lengths of time and maybe not saying a whole lot.
No,
really
save that for the what you're bad at. Talk about something you're actually good at. That's productive or something.
I can write okay. I tend to be able to connect concepts, abstract concepts. I tend to think, overanalyze things, overthink things.
Sure. So how is that to what ends is that good?
Well, I mean, I think in a general sense, I would probably say like thinking things through is probably synonymous with being critical, and critical thinking is valuable in pretty much every area of your life. But
sure. What kinds of things have you experienced in your life that you think have contributed to you being a good critical thinker, or like that being your just your baseline? Like, why is that such a baseline for you, is being able to think so critically?
Like, why is it a baseline? As in, like, why do I do it? Or
so, like, I mean, not everyone's good at that. Were you just born with it, or did you go through certain did your degree that you got in undergrad prepare you, or sort of train you to respond in that way? Or what kind of things have you experienced that have made that your go-to response is to really critically think about
things? I think
things?
it's all of the above, really.
Okay.
So I think maybe I was always a little bit more inquisitive as a kid. And I think I also spent a lot of time in my mind, you know what I mean? Like just thinking things through. I wouldn't say I was an introvert necessarily, but I definitely had kind of, I don't know, times where I just was not maybe as outgoing. And so you just spend a lot of time thinking, I think. And then in addition to that, going to school. So my undergrad, I did a double major in psychology and political science. And both of these were kind of my attempt at trying to understand, like, why do we do the things that we do? You know what I mean? So psychology being the study of human behavior, and then political science, the part that I was more interested in was the theory. So that's kind of what I focused in, but
Gotcha.
Political theory. And so kind of why do people do the things that they do in large groups? And so I think both of those, but especially political science, political theory, are trying to make claims about the nature of people, like who people are fundamentally. And so I was exposed to a lot of people thinking through those ideas, and I think I really enjoyed those. And so I think that further kind of, sent me into a place where thinking was a lot of what I did. And that's not to say it's like qualitatively good thinking, but it's just like just ruminating on other people's thoughts on society and stuff, or,
Sure.
What does it mean that abnormal psychology tells us so much about people? Like we learn so much about the, connection between the human mind and behavior through all these cases like traumatic brain injuries that we have happen. And suddenly this guy can't he has no inhibitions and you're like, what's going on? So,
Sure.
I don't know, stuff like that just kind of sent me to a place where I was doing a lot of thinking, and, particular theories that I encountered, I felt like were really interesting. And so, I don't know that those really prepare you for critical thinking specifically, but I think as you spend more time really reading what's essentially philosophy, you see how different people are able to approach the same problem, and it kind of gives you an appreciation for reevaluating things that you might take for granted or assume. So
we've been friends for a few years.
Yeah, dog.
And I didn't know that you were a psych major.
Yeah, man.
I was a psych major.
Everyone's a psych major.
Right?
Really, dude.
I honestly thought
honorary.
you did poli-sci and philosophy.
No, I did enough credits to get almost a minor in philosophy.
Gotcha.
Because they also crossed over between the political theory and philosophy.
Sure.
So I think I was 3 classes away. I think 9 credit hours from getting a minor in philosophy.
Got more letters.
What a loser.
Right.
You know what? If I would have got, the irony is if I would have got some sort of degree, minor or otherwise, in philosophy, I feel like people would have said the exact same thing if I told them that. Be like, yeah, I minored in philosophy. Be like, don't. Next time, just don't bring that up. You can go ahead and keep that to yourself.
Yeah, no one really cares about your minor because that doesn't mean you're an expert in it, right? That just means that you took some more classes.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's funny.
What about you, man? What are you good at?
So I have had it affirmed in me by multiple mentors and teachers that I am very teachable. It's super important to me in whatever job or roles that I have had. It's usually jobs. It's usually equivocated with something that's getting me money or something I'm really passionate about. So in college, it was being a worship leader. But I don't want to fail at it. And in particular, whoever is over me or whoever is depending on me, I don't want them to feel like I'm failing them. And so it's super important to me to hear any sort of, critical feedback. And then, if I don't know, how do I implement that feedback? Then even seeking feedback on okay, so what would you change about that? Or what would you have me change about that? Because I want to do it in a way that accomplishes the goals that you and I have, that basically I agreed to when I took this position. Right. And so, I just really don't want to fail.
So do you think maybe part of that, would you say you're perfectionist?
So I'm not a details person by any means. So if by perfectionist you mean someone who's got all the I's dotted and T's crossed, no. I'm pretty Like if you check my desk at work, it's super disorganized, but perfectionist in the sense that like I want to make sure I've covered all my bases in whatever the task is that I have set before me. So not so much that I've like, it's organized to me.
Yeah.
Like I have made sure that like I called everyone I needed to call. I communicated everything I needed to communicate. So, I mean,
kind of like it sounds like, we're describing like teachable. I think that's accurate for sure. Like soliciting feedback, but it sounds like you're also describing just like someone who's dependable, like
sure,
or reliable. Just
sure.
Like, yeah.
And I try to be. I mean,
Yeah.
I that's, one of my biggest things. When I got to college, even when I was in high school, but I think I just did a poor job of it when I was in high school because I was just trying to figure myself out. But in college, it became extremely important to me to be a good friend. Like I wanted my friends to be able to say like, Austin's a good friend. I didn't want them to have, I didn't want them to be able to say like anything bad about me or that I had like let them down or didn't come through for them. And so I've sort of carried that into a lot of different areas of my life too. Just not just friendships, but
we're gonna have to do a whole episode about that, dude. We're gonna have to
It's
unpack that childhood trauma.
traumas,
Exactly.
right? Whatever.
Yeah, dude.
I don't know. It's not that I don't believe in that stuff. I just don't
Sounds like
know
you don't believe that.
Well, it's not that I don't believe it. I was a psych
We're
major.
unpacking that 100%. Maybe not right now, but
It's not that I don't believe in it. I just don't think that it is always as debilitating as I think a lot of people make it seem like it is. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I could always be wrong.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, I just really like to be the best I can be.
Yeah.
I be all I can be. I should have joined the army.
All right, dude. So what's something you're bad at?
Oh yeah. You know this. I'm super bad at receiving help. Or receiving gifts. I'm really bad
positive
at
affirmation.
receiving compliments. I just don't like it because it makes me a little uncomfortable. I think I equivocate like receiving compliments with like easily getting big-headed or proud. And I grew up with a parental figure who like really tried to stomp out pride in me and my brothers because he didn't want us to be cocky. My dad did not want us to come off as like people thought we were hot stuff. And so like to this day, I see anyone like celebrate in the end zone after a touchdown, anything like that. I'm just like, why do you got to do that? Just play the game. Is it not enough?
You already make $40 million
okay, so
a year,
let's talk about this too, though. Like to a certain extent, like when did it become not enough to just win? Like, why do you have to rub people's faces in it, right? Like, when did it stop becoming enough to just like be better at something than someone else, or like do better at something than someone else?
I think the Eagles quarterback was talking about that last season.
Was he?
Jalen Hurts? Is that? I think he was in a post-game interview. And everyone's like, well, you guys kind of struggled with that last game. What's going on? And things is like, they're kind of trying to point out all these errors or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I don't know about you guys, but a win's really important. And
yeah.
like a win's a win,
Right.
And to a large extent in the NFL, especially, or maybe even every professional sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like where you're getting to the end of the season. I mean, I highly doubt that outside of a commentator referencing how many points you've what the spread in your game was average, they're always like their record is X, Y, and Z, not like their record was barely this or
right.
Yeah, that's weird.
But yeah, anyway, I'm bad at receiving gifts from people, or like Matt has been a good friend and like offered to foot the bill. There was one time in particular that afterwards I felt really bad. So my wife and I, Desiree, went out with Matt and Hannah, and we went and got dinner, and Matt like bought dinner, and I didn't like that. And so we went to the movies afterward, and I bought all of our tickets. And Matt was like, you just negated me buying you dinner. And I felt super bad because I know you were just trying to do something nice, and I just need to get over myself.
Hey, dude.
But I think where that comes from is I don't want people to feel like they need to foot the bill for me. Like I'm just like, I don't want people to be like, well, Austin's kind of a bum and I'm always having to pay.
I feel like it's going back to your dependability kind of thing. Like you don't want people to like you want people to be able to rely on you, and you don't want to give them the impression that you're relying on them to do whatever.
Which is kind of terrible considering that like that's how the church was built, to rely on each other.
Yeah. It's only like a really important aspect.
Yeah. It's that pride, man. It's that pride. It's snuck in somehow anyway. What are you bad at?
Dude, what am I not bad at, bro?
You're
like
such an idiot.
For real though, I think man, honestly, there's so many things I could go over, but I think one thing I'm really bad at is I think I'm bad at focusing in certain ways. So I get really into something and I'm like all in, you know what I mean?
Oh
like,
yeah.
And then like 3 months go by, maybe a year goes by, and it kind of loses its kind of novelty, or I just kind of become unfocused, you know what I mean? And then I'm like, and I just go on to something else. I wouldn't say it's like ADHD, because I feel like that's, first of all, that's a buzzword everyone uses, but also because like it's not that short term. Mm-hmm. I think it's much more long term, where it's like, I have this hobby and then I don't, and then I do this and then I don't. And I don't think that's necessarily bad.
Sure. One example I can think of is there was a short time where you got super into chess.
That's right, dude.
Yeah,
that's right.
Super into chess.
I still love it as a game. I in my mind, as I was getting into chess, I legitimately was like picturing in my mind I was going to be a grandmaster at like 55 or something. 55. And I was like working backwards in my mind. I was like, okay, if I want to be a grandmaster at 55, that means I got to play this many games. I need to read some opening strategy. I need to study up on these puzzles. Like I was all the way in. That's and I still really enjoy chess, but I just think like at some point my delusions of grandeur are confronted with like the amount of consistency and effort that it takes. And I'm like, I guess I don't really care about that much. And then I kind of move on. So that's not good. I would say that's not good, but I do that on different things. So
sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, dude.
What are your 3 favorite books, Matt?
Bro, 3 favorite books. I read a lot of nonfiction, a lot of like theology books and stuff. At least I have historically. But one of my favorite books is a book by this guy James K.A. Smith, and it's called "You Are What You Love."
I've been meaning, like every time you talked about this at that parent equipping night, and I was like, dang, I need to write that title down, because you talk about it a lot. So it's one that I definitely want to look into.
Well, it's based on. So James K. Smith is a theologian, philosopher, and he wrote a thing he calls them the cultural liturgies. It's 3 books, and it's like an analysis of kind of the Christian life. How do you live a faithful life, more or less? And one of them is called Desiring the Kingdom, and it's talking about like the role of desire and love of God, and like how that relates to believers, and how do you cultivate the affections that you want to have for God, or that he even calls you to have. One way to think about it is like, if you've ever read a book of theology, or even just read through the Bible or something, and it's like you spend that time, you read through it, and you come away being like, man, I know so much more. But then like 2 seconds later, you're like fighting with your wife or something, or you're yelling at your kids or whatever it is. Cause it's like, somehow that knowledge just didn't get down to the heart level, and it wasn't transformative in the way that you thought it was going to be. And I think he kind of runs with that idea and really tries to flesh out like why that is. And so, You Are What You Love is kind of it's like a compilation of his works, his cultural liturgy works. It's like more accessible, and those works that he did, the cultural liturgies, I think was a part of his like doctorate or something. And so, it's just way more approachable, and it really helps kind of contextualize like, what does it mean to be like somebody, a faithful Christian? Like, how do you believe? How do you love rightly?
Sure.
And like kind of the sub theme of the book is the spiritually formative power of habits, or something along those lines. The spiritual, I don't know, I'm probably butchering the subtitle, but that's essentially what it's about, is like connecting how habits actually they have a formative relationship with your affections, the things that you love. And so I don't know, I'm rambling about the book, but that's a huge book. For me, that's really revolutionized my approach to certain things, But that's not to say that like anything else, like I read it and I'm super jazzed about it, and then I have to go back and read it again because like 3 months later I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that's one. That's one. Second favorite book, man. I've been going through a series, Stormlight Archive. Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, I still gotta read it.
Dude.
Still gotta read it. Everyone says it.
Yeah, I'm still.
They're just hecka long, dude. Every book is like 1,200 pages.
So long, bro. So yeah, I mean, I'm still working through those. I'm on the, I think it's, oh my gosh, I forgot.
Is The Way
already.
of Kings the first one?
Yeah, it's The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Oathbringer, and then I'm on the next one, Rhythm of War.
Yeah.
And then the one
What's
that just came out.
What's
I think
it called?
it's like Wind and Truth.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, but there's supposed to be like 10 books, and that's like the first 5.
It's insane because I've also heard, so I just finished one of his books called Elantris, and it was like his first novel. And I was reading on like Reddit or something that like he has plans to add to that, because the book ends in a way that's like very
Open-ended
like,
kind of.
Oh yeah. Like the plot resolves in that book, but like there are certain statements that are made at the very end that it's like, oh yeah, like there's definitely more that could be explored here. So it's interesting if he's planning on, I mean, those are long books and it took him a while to get this last one out.
Yeah.
So he's going to end up being George R.R. Martin, where it's like he's going to die before he gets all this stuff out.
Well, the Amazon Prime did the Wheel of Time series, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was the one who took that from the original author and finished it. And
well, yeah, because the original author died.
Yeah.
Right? And so he worked with the author's son to like try to give a what's the word? I don't want to say accurate, but
like
true to
like
to
authentic
the author's
kind of,
original purpose.
But I think to that end, though, I think that's kind of maybe his goal with some of his epic fantasy works like Stormlight Archive, where he's like, I'm going for Wheel of Time length, you know what I mean? And he's going to be bringing characters back that you thought were dead like 20,000 pages ago.
What's interesting about the Wheel of Time is I was talking to some people and they were saying like, one thing about the Wheel of Time is like when you hit a lull, there's so many books in the Wheel of Time that it's like that lull is there for like a book or two. It's not just like a few chapters of lull, right? So I don't know if anyone disagrees with that. Don't hate me. I'm just saying what I have heard. But like that would be a trudge because it's like 15 books, isn't it? The Wheel of Time.
I think so. It's super long. Also, like shout out to Amazon for picking up like making a show of a book that has so much source material that it's like you're committing to potentially like seasons and seasons of the show.
Yeah, potentially. I have, to be honest, I have not watched the Wheel of Time series. Yeah. My sister watched it, and I have heard from her and other people that it's kind of
mid
doo-doo. Kind of like their Rings of Power series.
Let's talk about your favorites.
Absolute garbage.
Are you a big Lord of the Rings guy?
I love Lord of the Rings. That's my number one, Lord of the Rings. If we can say that 3 books is my favorite book, then yeah. Lord of the Rings is like, when it comes to fantasy, I think in a lot of people's minds, but certainly my mind, like Tolkien is gold standard fantasy. Like nothing, I don't think anything will ever top that in terms of like my excitement about it. And also like his world building, dude. Yeah. Like it's just so complex.
Making your own language for the elves, dude.
I mean, so he wrote Lord of the Rings as sort of like his attempt at creating a mythology for like an English mythology. So, there's Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Norse mythology. And he was like, England doesn't really have a mythology. So he took it upon himself to be like, if I was writing a mythology that essentially represented like how England came to be, how the world came to be, and how England came to be this like, or Britain, whatever, came to be this like major power, what would I...
But you know what's crazy about that though, dude, is like, while I think he's brilliant, don't take anything away from him. I'm not. But I'm also going to say, like, sometimes history's pretty wild. And, like, it's crazy that he's like, man, we needed some sort of,
well, I don't think that he necessarily would say that England has always done the best.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, as an English historian myself, because I've seen all the Viking shows. So
right. Yes.
I'm an expert. I'm somewhat of an expert myself.
We watched with Uhtred, son of Uhtred.
Dude, The Last Kingdom? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
That one's pretty dope. The movie was it was okay, but overall it was a good show.
Yeah, it was fine. I think the movie I wasn't super satisfied with. But anyway, Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
He just did such a fantastic job of setting the stage, because if you read The Hobbit and you read The Lord of the Rings, there's so many references that he makes in those books that if it was some lesser fantasy writer, you would just be like,
C.S. Lewis.
Oh, so that's, hey, now C.S. Lewis is pretty good too. But, if it was some lesser fantasy writer, it's just like, oh, well, maybe he'll touch on that sometime in a future book. But Tolkien doesn't do that. He's like, if he references something, he's got a footnote to take you to an appendix to give you the down and dirty about well, what is that even referring to? And if you don't look at the appendix, go read the Silmarillion, go read Unfinished Tales. You will figure out what it is referring to, because he fleshed out this world so well. I can't imagine. I mean, I know he had his whole career to do that, but to accomplish all of that in the amount of time that he was alive is astounding to me.
I guess that's why I consider one of my issues not being as consistent or disciplined at certain things, because that is a life dedicated to this thing.
Well, 100%.
Because it's and it's cool to think, or maybe fantasize, since we're talking about fantasy. Mm-hmm. It's cool to fantasize about the things you could potentially do if you were just 100% sold out. You're man, every day,
right,
I'm just gonna write a little bit about this fantasy.
But that's what's crazy, is that he was a professor at Oxford. Oxford, right? I'm pretty sure it was Oxford. He was a language professor, linguistics professor or something. And so he had a full-time job. And on top of that, he was creating fake languages. Yeah. He created Dwarvish, Orcish, Elvish.
Dang, so he created more than one language?
And it's not even just crazy, amongst Elvish, there are different
dialects.
Oh, there's Sindarin, there's Teleri, there's it's bonkers, dude.
That is
and
bonkers.
Just he had children. He raised kids too.
Does his children know that?
What are you doing? Do his children know that he has children?
Because for real though, what are you doing?
I'm right. I know, dude. It's just insane. How did he have time to do it? Probably because he didn't have freaking Apple TV to fill his spare time with TV
he wasn't
shows.
Watching
he wasn't
Severance. He was creating high art,
Silo, yeah. But it's just insane, the capacity that he had. And maybe he was a terrible father. I don't know. I'm not saying he was. I'm just saying I don't know how he juggled all that stuff. Yeah. Being a father of only one myself right now.
Yeah.
But anyway, dude, it's awesome. Go look up the Tolkien Geek on YouTube. Go look up other Tolkien educators out there. It's
Tolkien
insane.
Or Tolkien?
I say Tolkien, but I'm probably wrong. It's IEN. So I just think I'm a big rule follower, and the English language has rules. So there's one word in physical therapy that I have always said different than everyone else. It's spelled SACCADES. How would you say that?
I first have to spell it in my mind.
SACCADES.
Can you do that with colorful pictures?
No, I can do sign language.
Saccades?
So it's so it's a hard C. K, like the K sound.
But you said CC?
Yeah, CC.
Saccades?
Okay, so that's how I say it. Why? Why do you say it that way?
The AE, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. So there's an E at the end of the word, which means that it's a long A. That second A is a long A. So the way that people in my profession say it is saccades.
Why?
I couldn't tell you.
Was the etymology of the word something like it's Latin sounds more like...
You know what? Maybe, but I don't think that matters, because this is
English.
This is English. And the English language has
here
rules.
In Arkansas.
The English language has rules, man. If there's an E at the end of the word, the vowel before it is a long vowel sound.
I mean, that seems intuitive.
Okay, yeah, I agree. So
it sounds like we're in the minority.
Saccades, man. Tolkien.
So that's how many books have we gone over?
2.
Jeez, dude.
Right? Because you talked about You Are What You Love.
Did you talk about one after that? Stormlight Archive.
Stormlight, yeah. Dude, okay. So we talked about Lord of the Rings for me. So another Sanderson book, this is my second favorite book, is Hero of Ages. So it is the third in the Mistborn, the first Mistborn series or Mistborn trilogy. Now, I liked all of those books, but I feel like if we're saying what's your favorite book, and I just am like, these series, then that doesn't seem like I am very decisive. So
that's exactly what I did. You're saying I'm not decisive.
It's okay. I did the same. Lord of the Rings
is
is a series, and you gave me one book,
that's true.
That's true. And then a series.
We both had a series, so I have to.
So Hero of Ages is just look. That whole series was full of twists and turns that I did not see coming, and Hero of Ages was just like a beautiful cherry on top. I mean, it was so good. It was so good. And he did such a good job of keeping me compelled. I will say, for me personally, the absolute most interesting thing about that whole series is the character Sazed. He is this, so his people are the Terrace people, so he's called a Terraceman. And the Terrace people, I'll try not to spoil too much, but like the Terrace people are, like their religion is Terrace. And, in the first book, you find out that the Lord Ruler, who like rules the empire, tried to essentially like kill all of these Terrace people off because the Terrace people have some of them have access to a certain type of magic called Farukami, and basically what that means is you can store certain physical or mental attributes or traits in metal. And so Sazed's role as a Terraceman is he studies and stores the knowledge of like the world's lost religions. And so the thing that makes him so captivating is his role as this like religious encyclopedia, but also like his interactions with what does he actually believe about the world and like the universe and stuff. And so and that whole role that he serves like really gets fleshed out in such a captivating way that I'm not saying that the rest of the story the chapters jump between a lot of different characters, but if it was just a story about Sazed, that I would have read the whole thing regardless if it was just Sazed, because he was 100% the most interesting character to me.
100%. I mean, I would agree. I think the interesting thing too is that like the main character, I don't know if I would say becomes less interesting, but by the end of the book, there was a point at which I was like, I'm not really, I'm more concerned with people on the ground.
You're talking about Vin or Ellen?
Talk about Vin.
Vin. So Vin, I feel like her character arc just sort of stopped somewhere in book 2.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like she hit this peak allomancer and like she just sort of stayed that same person throughout the whole rest of Well of Ascension and well, not really, I guess, Well of Ascension, because there's that big thing that happens in the book that it's like that really changes her, but like her story arc in Hero of Ages is just kind of gets stagnant, where it's like she's like this super powerful allomancer warrior.
But the world building in that is really cool too. Like at least the magic system's there, like, and he builds enough of the world out that it keeps you intrigued. Like, why is there ashes constantly? You know what I mean? Like, just kind of like, and cool
the way
stuff.
that in the end, when you kind of find out like what was going on with the environment, like why did the environment change so much from, you know, what they had heard about, plants having been green? That was nuts.
If you're listening to this, we're not spoiling enough for you, so you need to go read it,
so that way we can just like talk about it openly, because we haven't gotten to really talk about this.
We're gonna do an episode on it though.
Yeah, for sure. So don't listen to that episode if you're not if you're reading it or going to read it. But such a good series. That's why, like, but what's crazy is that everyone talks about or heralds the Stormlight Archive as like his like best work, and so I'm stoked to start it, because I'm like, dude, I enjoyed Mistborn so much that Stormlight had better be just
it's fantastic, bonkers. Dude. It really is. I think the magic system, the world building is just more complex, and the magic system's slightly more complex as well. And there's like a theme of tens throughout the whole series, which is really, really cool how it breaks down. Like it's all related to the system that he has. And I think the compelling part about the Stormlight Archive is actually like the overall narrative is awesome. It's fun. But one of the most compelling parts is like the characters he builds into it, that he gets you like super attached to, and you're watching them develop over time, and you're like, man, this is awesome. And there's like just so many different themes in there that you're probably used to in various sci-fi or fantasy tropes. You know, it's like the man versus, versus nature, man versus man, and so like you get enough of the stuff you're used to that it keeps you engaged, and you get some of the unique fantasy elements that are kind of specific to him. So it's
one
really
thing
well
that
done.
I think is interesting about Brandon Sanderson is that when I was listening to Elantris, sort of a precursor, the narrator was sort of reading this introduction by one of Brandon Sanderson's friends who was like in this writing club with him. And one of the pieces of feedback that Brandon Sanderson had gotten from his mentors is like he develops these really interesting characters, but then they don't do anything. Like there's not any major plot. They're just like really well thought out characters with great backstories. And then it's like, well, they don't do anything.
Yeah.
And so,
or sometimes they do stuff, but it's like they don't do anything impactful for like 2 books.
Yeah.
And
so,
you're just like, I don't know.
I liked Elantris once it finally picked up. It's like a 62 or 63 chapter book. And the longest part of the book is like the first 25 chapters. And it's not until like chapter 25 that things really start to pick up. So the first 25 chapters were an absolute trudge, and I was listening to it.
Yeah.
So imagine trying to read.
Yeah, dude.
but once it picked up, it was great.
The Stormlight Archive books are actually pretty good to listen to because they have like dedicated male voice and female voice, and so it's a little bit more like voice actory, and so I think they do a good job. I think it's the same people that do Mistborn. It's the same two that do Stormlight Archive, but
gotcha.
I think. Yeah,
I kind of have this thing about like I have this thing about reading though. Like I feel like I'm not being faithful
unless
I'm reading it. And Elantris was just one of those things where it's like, I read on Mistborn covers like the author of the novel Elantris, and I was like, oh, that'd be cool to get exposed to. But at the time, I just didn't want to spend the money on another book because I had just bought the first 3 of the Stormlight Archive, and so I just started listening to it. And I'm no hate, Brandon. I love what you do, and you do it great. But Elantris is not one of my favorites, so I'm kind of glad I didn't buy that book.
Yeah, I would try to get in on Stormlight for sure. That's up there. I think we're still at 2 books, right? Dang, bro, we're never finishing this episode.
I know. What's your third?
My third book. Dang, dude.
Do you have a third? Is it fiction or nonfiction? You read a lot of nonfiction, but
it's mostly nonfiction.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a fiction book. There's one that I read as a kid that I've always, I'd say frequently, I've frequently gone back to. It's an alien book called Earthhive, I'm pretty sure. Talks about like how aliens took over the world, kind of.
Okay.
Aliens is in like the chest burster.
Yes.
Sigourney Weaver? Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really cool book. And if you're into aliens, I'd say and you're into sci-fi, it's obviously a sci-fi book, but that one's really cool. And it kind of just comes up in my mind a lot because of certain other kind of themes and other sci-fi stuff that reminds me of it. But if I wasn't going to pick a fiction book, I did just recently pick up a book about it's called Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, and it's like an analysis of like how people have come to identify themselves in modern society. And it's really, really good. I haven't finished it yet, so I don't know if it's like a favorite, but it's very, very, it's really kind of like one of those things where you read it and it helps you contextualize some of the debates and conversations happening at like more of a political level. Yeah. And even just certain things that like you run into where you think like kind of strange, or maybe just you have trouble understanding in terms of how people are creating identities and stuff like that, or how like simply the belief in yourself as a certain person or type of person is enough to justify it. Like how does a society get to a point where that is normalized and stuff? So
yeah,
it's kind of a weird combination of like social critique, philosophy, theology. So far, it's really good.
That is interesting.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about it.
It's just funny because you read such like very thought-provoking stuff, and I mean I read fantasy novels, and like right now I'm reading 1984 too, which is not fantasy by any means. It's dystopia. Dude. But like the other stuff that I read that isn't just fiction is like journal articles for physical therapy.
That's That's because you're helping real life people.
Yeah, well,
that's why you don't
you're
read.
right. I love it. It's super interesting to me, but it's not like this. Reading things about the state of the world or anything like that.
I don't know, man. I just enjoy that kind of stuff. So, for instance, 1984 is an example of dystopian work by Orwell, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I remember, this has been a while since I've read about this, but I remember there was a conversation going on with George Orwell and his, I think it was like his pupil, Aldous Huxley.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're familiar with or remember the name but don't remember the work, in school I was required to read Brave New World.
Oh,
it's
I mean, I'm familiar with the
dystopian
title, but I've never read it.
So it's also a dystopian book. But here's kind of an interesting fun fact and why I kind of enjoy like the philosophy stuff, because it seeps into the stories we tell. And George Orwell had a view of people, and he kind of like the main theme of 1984 is like, how do you control people, or what's the way that people are most motivated?
Yeah.
And his basic theme is that fear is what motivates people.
Yeah.
Fear is what controls people. And so that's kind of an exploration of that theme. And Aldous Huxley was like a close buddy of his or pupil. I forget the relationship. But he kind of posited something different. He said like, no, I think the thing that motivates people the most is pleasure or a fear of pain. And so in A Brave New World, when you read that book, he depicts a dystopian future where people are like super medicated and childbirth doesn't happen naturally anymore. It's all like test tube babies kind of thing. It's just a wild depiction of people where like the pursuit of pleasure is the main motivation in life, and the like complete like dissolving of pain or like the natural aversion to it is like something that everyone has. And so they've like outlawed natural childbirth and all this stuff. It's just like a wild book. And it's funny because it was kind of like one guy said, the problem with society is people are too fearful and they don't like have enough individual resolve to kind of stand up for themselves and stuff. And the other guy was like, no, the problem is not fear. It's that people are just too easily manipulated by their passions, by their desires, you know? So that's kind of an interesting thing that, I remember reading a long time ago. I'm sure there's more like deeper analysis, more accurate, but yeah, I'll have to check that one out, dude.
Yeah, it's actually the first time I'm reading 1984. It wasn't one that I was required to read in high school, and so, but it's one everyone knows. I mean, I think everyone's familiar with at least the name, and so just thought I would dive into it.
Yeah, dude. So we've gone quite a while now. We've answered a lot of questions.
Good conversation.
Yeah,
dude.
It was a great time, dude. So that's gonna wrap it up for today. Next episode, conspiracy theories?
We could talk about it. I don't know. I mean, we have quite a list, so I think that'd be a good one.
If you're listening, if you're watching, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to our Clear Overthinking.
Clearly. See ya.
Bye.